We'll just start. All right. Oh, where is that?
Yes.
I gotta fix this one here.
Definitely.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. Very excited to be with you. We got an interesting topic to talk about today. This one has to do with our incompetent Secretary of State statements that the world looks up to America. Yeah.
Would you like to play
It
that? Would you
doesn't.
like me to play
Yeah,
that?
why not? Let's start with that shocking video.
All right. So this came from the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland that happened this last week. And if you watched any of it, it's kind of a gold mine for things like this. And it seems in its own way a little bit delusional, but it is the elites of the elites saying what they really think out loud. So let's start with Secretary Blinken making sure that the world knows that the U.S. is in demand across the globe. Oops, sorry guys, I didn't add it to the stream. I was like, why isn't it playing? Let's add it. There we go. Now you guys can see it. All right, let me bring it back a hair.
Have this profound and in many ways gut-wrenching challenge right now. Here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from virtually every country. They want the United States. They want us present. They want us at the table. They want us leading. President Biden used to like to say that he's never been to any country where the United States was not all at once the source of its problem and its only solution. Well, that's a slight exaggeration of this moment, but I think there's a kernel of truth there. And there's something else that's very powerful from our perspective. We know that if we're not engaged, if we're not leading, then one of two things. Either someone else is, and just from the perspective of an American, that probably means that that's going to happen in a way that may not reflect our own interests and values, or even worse, maybe, no one is. Yeah. And then you've got a vacuum, and we both know vacuums tend to be filled by bad things.
Oh no!
Whoa.
Oh no! That's idiocy. Actually, there is another one who can do a far better role, which is China, because he will approach it diplomatically. Now, Russia will not be in a position to do so, but for him to say, "Well, there is nobody," it's nonsense. That shows you that Tony Blinken is not a diplomat. He's not a seasoned diplomat, so he doesn't have the ins and outs and understanding really where things are headed now. Because of his background, he used to be as the national security advisor to the Vice President Biden back then. Foreign policy is different stories. Geopolitics is different. It's a different ball game altogether. To those who wants to opine on global affairs or geopolitics without a background, you can just see them right there. They're flat out on their face. Why? They don't have the background for it. They don't have the understanding of it. So I always frown at people who try to be smart, showing I'm so smart and talking about topics that they have no clue about. This is one example. So for him to say there is no country that will step in, only the United States, that's wrong, because China can step in diplomatically. Russia can step in also, but Russia is in no position to do so today. No other Gulf state, no other Arab country is in possession because Arab countries are so weak. And this is why his statements doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's nothing but manipulation. That's the way I look at it.
Well, one of the other things I really want to point out about this is, David, when he said Biden always used to say that the U.S. was simultaneously the country's problem and also their solution. Yeah. That's not a good thing to be.
That is not to be proud of.
Place to be. Well, you don't want to be the country's problem and the solution. That's more or less holding a country hostage. First of all, causing the problem to begin with, and then holding it hostage.
Yeah. Well, like what we did in Ukraine. We created the problem,
right?
And we were trying to solve it. How do you solve it? By fomenting more tensions. You all know about NATO preparing for this massive drills for, did you know that their exercises, it's going to be till May? Usually exercises like this. I was in the military. We used to do the FTX, what's called the FTX, field trained exercises. Usually 2 weeks, 3 weeks max.
Yeah.
But that's about it. For them, this starting next week, all the way to May. Yeah, February, March, April, and May. 4 months. What you gonna be doing in 4 months for this?
No.
So that just shows you when Biden says what he said, or the incompetent Secretary of State saying that Biden said that, Biden is clueless. And this is now because that's gonna put now, it's already putting our country under the microscope anyway, given what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah.
No. And that refusal of the ceasefire shows you right there where the problem is.
So would you like to hear what Secretary of State Blinken said about Gaza?
Sure. Given that
would you
he's
guys like to hear
he's
this?
the dual citizen, he's a Jew. By nothing against that, it just makes me wonder, who is he working for?
Well, so I to me, okay, I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna show this to you guys, and then we're gonna ask some really deep questions about this because yeah, there's clearly some questions to ask about his position on this.
For me, I think for so many of us, what we're seeing every single day in Gaza is gut-wrenching. And the suffering we're seeing among innocent men, women, and children breaks my heart. The question is, what is to be done?
That is the question.
We've made judgments about how we thought we could be most effective in trying to shape this in ways to get more humanitarian assistance to people, to get better protections and minimize civilian casualties. At every step along the way, not only have we impressed upon Israel its responsibilities to do that, we've seen some progress in areas where, absent our engagement, I don't believe it would have happened.
He's lying.
Okay.
He's lying. First of all, just the wording when he said we pressed upon Israel to do. You know, you did not press upon Israel. Nobody did. That's a lie. So, and this is where you guys have to always be careful with the statements from so-called politicians. He, as I said earlier, I have nothing against him, but he's no diplomat. So those individuals tend to just use terminology that can really sway your thinking. Oh, he said that he's been pressing on Israel. We never did. We never will. That's the hard fact. Why? Because of how the government is managed in Washington from behind the scenes. But you see all those, the president, the secretary of defense, those are just pieces of chess that can be moved in any direction. That's not the complexity of the Middle East is far what anybody can simplify it in terms of, oh, you got issue A, just do solution B, and you have a result, solution C. Doesn't work that way. The complexities of the Middle East are far entrenched into the history of that region. Goes way back beyond what we could even imagine. And solving this kind of problems, even though for this problem here, there's only one solution, two-state solutions. No any other option.
Yeah.
So to those countries who argue, well, we're gonna, it's like what happened in Europe now. Europe, you got two countries that opposed ceasefire.
Yeah.
Opposed it completely. And the two countries are, do you know which countries?
Yeah, let's see if you guys can
yeah,
let's
which
start
one?
with
Let's
you,
say.
I bet.
Type it in, guys.
Type it into the chat box.
Let's see which one are those. Two countries in Europe that now refused the sanctions on Israel.
Let's see if they can guess it. And guys, it is a dark and stormy day here. So if it's dark here in the studio, it's a dark and stormy day. And I will use this opportunity as we do this. Our last video got demonetized, so I'm not surprised, I guess, but we're not particularly thrilled about it. So if you would like to support us, please check out our locals. It's our community, and it's also a way to support us if you guys want to. And I pinned the comment so you can do a direct link to it. We do lives on there. We have conversations, and it's something we want to build up so that you guys can really join us in the conversation in kind of a safe space.
Yeah.
All right. you
One
see
guy got it right.
right.
One got it right. Is all the way up in Cody Leonard. You guys, you got it right. It's Austria and Czech.
Mhm.
No, but here is the reason why. Also, you need to understand the history of Austria and Czech back then, especially after World War II, which is very troubling to begin with.
Yeah.
And it shows you that Europeans now even are divided because some ministers have called on sanctioning Israel. You and I know it's not going to move forward. It just talks. The EU wants to show that it has teeth. It wants to show that it can stand on its feet. EU is gone. EU is so weak, the European Union, that is. Like I always say, the analogy, the EU is like a child that never grows up
Mhm.
and is always in constant need of discipline
Yeah.
and direction.
Well, and so let's take a look at that for a second,
Yeah.
because there's a reason that that's the case. And I want to look at particularly the end of an empire cycle, because David, a lot of the countries in Europe were once the largest empires. They were the global hegemons, right?
Yeah.
Before the United States was. So we have Britain, we have the Dutch, we have France, who were all these large hegemonic empires
Yeah.
in the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
Right. So what happened to them? And then we look at Germany. What happened after World War II? Germany's not allowed to have a standing army, which we have a show coming out about that very soon. But look at what happened to them. They were these giant colonies that did a whole bunch of bad across the world. And now they're just their own tiny countries. And they don't have the same level of influence that they did back when they were the ones in power. They were the ones in control. And I wonder what's going to happen to the United States, because I think as any major economist is talking about, this is the end of the cycle for the United States. It's hard for us because we're on the ship that's sinking, right? We're on that sinking ship right
Yes,
now.
the reality.
So I don't want it to sink. That's rough for us, but that is the truth of what's happening, regardless whether we want to acknowledge it or not. It is the end of a cycle, and costly wars is one of those markers for the end of the cycle, the fourth turning, whatever you'd like to call it. That's one of those big markers. And what are we seeing right now? Costly, never-ending wars. And what just happened with the Houthis in regards to the Red Sea? So one of the things that just happened in regards to that is that the US government basically said, hey, we are just going to have this open-ended conflict. We're not going to call it a war, but it's this open-ended conflict with the Houthis.
Well, actually, Biden broke the law anyway.
When
they launched the attack, he broke the law.
Because it wasn't passed through Congress?
Well, Congress has to declare that.
Yeah.
So that shows you right there. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. But it's not about that. It's about who is controlling the narrative behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There is the hidden hand behind the scenes that is managing all this. Let me say thank you here to Alexandros Katsis. Thank you very much. You wrote, any chance that resources around Cyprus will affect this conflict any further? Much love from Greece. By the way, I've been in Greece. I enjoyed visiting Athens. I was walking around history. You walk around and you think about, oh, this is where it all started.
Yeah.
And a lot of people nowadays, they don't understand the history of Europe, especially for us in the West. Yeah. And Athens was so I enjoyed visiting Athens, but I haven't been.
I've never been.
It's worth visiting.
A lot of other places in the world, but I've never been to
if
Greece.
I advise, it's worth visiting. So the answer to your question, it's not a question, a statement, but it will impact it, but not so much, because there are other elements regarding, for example, if you think about energy, what's going on. Energy, not the one that is around that area, but rather the one in the Mediterranean. And I know the conflicts between, Turkey, Cyprus, Greece, and all that, it's all entangled. Now, this is what makes it even complicated. But just specifically for Cyprus, I don't see the issue impacting it, except that what is going to happen between Turkey and what Turkey does. And what do I mean by this? I mean that, just imagine this, and for all of you guys, What will happen if Turkey ends up sending troops to Gaza? Just think about it. Think about it. How that's going to change the equation. I don't even know for now whether Turkey is sending its troops to the military drills.
Yeah.
NATO said that it is all 31 countries. That means including even Sweden, who has not become a full member. But what NATO says versus what it is are two opposite things.
Right.
That's just for the hypes of it, to hype up the rhetoric and the narrative about, oh my gosh, NATO is going to do this. You might have some countries that saying, no, we're not sending our troops. You know, and it was some leaked information in the Ministry of Defense in Germany that all this is in preparation for a war with Russia. Once again, I won't buy that. It just hypes, no more, no less.
Well, and that is sort of the narrative that's coming out, because you know, the Ukraine, I think the offensive did much more poorly than anybody is willing to, I guess, admit publicly.
Yeah.
And so there really is that sort of rumbling, that conversation of what is going to happen with Ukraine next, right? What is going to are they going to give up territory? Is Russia going to just back off? You know, what's going to happen, right? And so it is interesting hearing the narrative come back to, well, you know, the EU is next. You know, after Ukraine, Russia's going to go after the EU next.
Because they said that's gonna, first of all, before the EU, they said it was Poland. So this Russia's gonna invade Poland. Well, it's nonsense.
And Poland doesn't seem to buy that.
And the younger generation in Poland, they have nothing against the Russians. Now, the older generation slightly different because they never forget what took place.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the history was peaceful. No, it wasn't. But they moved on. So, but for Europe, for NATO to ratchet up the conversation is that they are saying, no. Russia is gonna invade Poland first, then it's gonna attack Europe. And all this has to do with the big picture. And the big picture is, because here is the question for you. What is NATO's motto? Can you guys type it? What is NATO's motto? Let me see. I'm not putting them in a questioning them. I'm just having them part of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We love having you
I'm
guys
not in a classroom. That's different with my students.
Well, you know what? But you're a teacher no matter what.
Yeah, I like conversing with our members, the community here. Yeah, what is NATO's motto?
OMSI has a very
you're right, OMSI. That was the what's his name? Former CIA director that said that one. So NATO equal US, that is correct. But there is one specific motto that is known.
We've said it before.
Yeah, and it takes a while. It takes a while before it comes in. So I'll keep an eye on it. But that is the reason why you are hearing what you're hearing as far as the narrative. It's because they want to create the fear. That's one. But there is the bigger objective. That is the whole reason for it. I'm like somebody to at least.
Alessia Hill, that one's funny. What's yours is ours. What's ours is ours.
Actually, Sanel got it.
Yeah, Sanel got it.
So, which is correctly right. Keep the US in, keep the Germans down, and keep the Russians out. That is so. You think about what NATO's saying, and you think about that motto. And that's the explanation. As a geopolitical analyst, that's the only way I see it. And this is why some analysts around the world, not just here in the US, of course, the US won't want to come forward with that, are questioning the justification for NATO to begin with. The whole reason for why it existed ceased to exist, which is Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So what is NATO doing? Now NATO is getting involved in nation building. Really? Is getting involved in terrorism. Really? Is getting involved in organized crime. Really? Oh. When I was in Afghanistan, I saw NATO there.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the heck are you guys doing here?
Well, if you don't, I mean, it's the whole thing. So the US budget is something that we talk about every so often because it's absolutely terrifying in case anybody's also paying attention to the US budget. But the whole deal is if you don't increase your budget, it goes away.
Yeah.
And so then you don't have that
They have to
money
find
anymore,
some-
right?
yeah,
So you have to
to
find
find something.
something to do. You have to find somewhere to be, some way to justify.
But
your
the problem with all
existence.
that is we are living on debt because the amount of money the government is printing now is impacting
Absolutely.
every other aspects.
Absolutely.
Because we just, our thing circulates that is backed by debt
Mhm.
versus if you have some hard assets. So it's other countries, that's why you don't see their budget at $800 billion.
Yeah.
You don't see it.
Well, so I do want to go back to Blinken
Yeah.
and what he said, because some of this is actually very important to look at. The first thing that he talked about was the fact that, you know, that the US was trying to influence Israel to, you know, less civilian casualties and all of that. And sort of my question is to him, or whoever is listening, is if the US can't influence Israel, who can?
Nobody.
If the US is providing the weapons, if the US is providing the funding, and then the US still can't influence Israel.
And there is a third element.
What is
Don't
that?
forget it. Diplomatic cover.
Right. So if the US is providing all of those things,
Yeah. In international forums.
right.
Like what happened at the UN.
Right. And
That is very important.
Yes, all of
It's
the
very important.
votes,
Yeah.
that all of the votes where all of the other countries said yes, ceasefire, yes,
Ceasefire,
ceasefire.
but
right?
the US.
But so if the US is providing those three things, you're absolutely right, David.
Yeah.
If the US is providing those three things and they still cannot influence Israel, who is in charge here?
Yeah.
And I think fundamentally that's my question is, you know, it's sort of it when Anthony Blinken said what is to be done.
Yeah.
Well, if he, as Secretary of State, if he and our officials can't figure out what is to be done, then who can?
They're not equipped for that.
Calling the shot. But do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If we're providing weapons, money, and political cover, geopolitical cover for
Mhm.
them,
Mhm.
who can do something if it's not the US? And it's very strange to me. On one hand, he's talking about how everybody in the Middle East wants the US at the table, but then at the same
they don't.
time, what is to be done? We're so powerless about this.
Yeah.
That's very strange.
That era
That's
is
very
gone.
strange to
That
me.
era is gone for the US. The dominance in the Middle East, because we had it for almost 70 years. 70 years.
Mhm.
So it's over. It's over for the US. This is why you're seeing one of the key challenges to the United States. And I bet you the reason why Tony said that, it's because Washington came to realize doesn't have any more support in the middle from a regional
Yeah.
countries in the Middle East.
Yeah.
That's why he used what he used. If you listen carefully to what he said, so many that I talked to, I'm paraphrasing what he said.
yeah.
So many that I talked to in the region said that they want the US at the table.
Mhm.
Well, those in the Middle East are not on board with what the US is doing. So he had to word it in a way
Yeah.
that can justify the narrative. That is all about. So I do see something here from OMC that you put this without saying the name. I can see that influence, but in a different direction, because that is where the concern of Israel right now, that is why they want these 2 months ceasefire.
Mhm.
There is just a conversation about it. It's not that, because they know that up north, near where this group that you typed about, the HZ,
Mhm.
they know what the consequences will be. So Israel understands that reality, which means what? This is why Israel had to inform Washington that it intends to go into Lebanon, which means what also? That means you better get on board with us, meaning the US. So in other words, Israel will drag the United States into that. We all remember what happened back in 1986, if I am not mistaken. Do you guys remember what happened in 1986 in Beirut? Can anybody type in?
Yeah. I met a veteran from that once,
Yeah.
and his
1986, I
yeah,
recall it.
the PTSD he had from that experience
Yeah.
was very severe. He
So-
lost
So
a
this
lot
is
of
where that
friends.
challenge is. So when Tony Blinken, the incompetent. To me again, I'm nothing. I met him personally. We talked for about literally a few minutes. Nothing, not that I know him. We met personally because it was in Iraq. I was in Iraq, and we were riding the bus to the plane. And we just at that time, someone introduced me to him. We shook hand, and we talked briefly. Hi, how are you? But that's about it. And of course, I'm not judging the guy. It's just now that he's been put under the microscope of the international diplomacy, it became clear and evident that he is not qualified, was never qualified for the position. And that also highlights the changes on the global stage. Changes that not to the likings of the US, but the world doesn't care anymore what the US thinks. The world is moving on. It's a multipolar. This is, again, where you ask the question about, for example, what is the word I'm looking for? The relevancy of NATO in a multipolar world. Because we don't have East and West. Yeah, you have East and West in a different setting, but not like what it was. NATO on one end and the Warsaw Pact on the other. Whether the Washington likes it or not now, the world is changing. That is how it is moving forward.
A couple of people got it in the chat.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, guys. Is the bombing of the barracks. And you know why that happened? Is because we never understood the dynamics on the ground as to the complexity of just one country, was Lebanon. If you only know how many sects exist in that country, from the Maronites and Druze to the Christians and Muslims to the Sunnis and the Alawites, and it's a very entangled. We had no clue about that, thinking that, and this is the problem we do. We think that the rest of the world has to think like us. That doesn't exist.
For sure.
That doesn't exist. That would be idiotic for us to be considering that. When you go to another country, you're going to have to go by their rules. You're going to have to go by their culture. You're going to have to respect their traditions and so forth, even when you're dealing with them diplomatically.
Right.
That's what a real diplomat does. So unfortunately, we don't have that.
Interestingly enough, David, we actually don't have that as a cultural value here in the United States.
No, we don't.
And I think it's partially because of the history of the United States. So,
we only 200.
Right.
200 years is nothing.
And so there is no sort of fundamental culture of the United States. We're sort of this melting pot of all these different cultures. And so fundamentally here, people don't respect American culture for sure. And then, so there's no real understanding of respect for other cultures. And, the history of the
what's
US,
sad to say, sorry to say, but sad to say, what do we offer? What do we offer the world?
Well, right now,
as far as culture,
what
do we have?
Right.
I mean, you look at now where this woke mentality of you can now tell a man to be a man and a woman be a woman. Where is that?
Don't get too far down that. We'll talk more about this on Rumble.
So,
if you guys notice, we're a little quieter here on YouTube after our last live stream got demonetized. So we are trying to keep it a little.
So where is the democracy in our country when that happens?
A little chiller than normal, but we're going to be on Rumble Live immediately after this. So check us out on our Rumble Live.
Coach Hoy, good to see you as always. Really appreciate your super sticker. Coach Hoy has been with us for a long time. Thank you so much for that. Truly appreciate it. So the idea of how were things moving from a diplomatic perspective, it was nothing but hypes. To say that the world looked up to the United States. Yeah, it did back in the 50s, back in early 60s, starting in the 70s, we start going down and it takes time. This is why the world is shifting into an opposite direction and we are resisting that change. Well, whether we like it or not, it's moving on. And statements from Blinken or whomever else ain't gonna sway or change the outcome. Now, there are individuals who might not understand the depth of what this is all about. They're gonna fall prey to this kind of thinking because that's manipulation. So
The thing is, it's very easy to, if you don't really understand how
Yeah.
complex geopolitics is, it's
Yeah.
easy to look at the news and say, okay, well, so the news says these one guys are bad and these one guys are good,
yeah,
and have like a complete bad guy, right? And
Uh-huh.
that was something that they tried to do to Russia in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, is to make Russia the ultimate bad guy. But as the Ukraine conflict continued and continued and continued, the truth
it
started to
became
come
clear,
out more
yeah.
and more and more,
yeah,
that in geopolitics, there's very rarely like one complete bad guy, right? There might be a bad guy, okay, but there's always complexity to the situation. But when you are looking at the situation, you don't understand the complexity. You want to be able to say, like in the movies, right? Like there's always one superhero. There's the one good guy, right? Superman's the good guy.
Yeah.
And then, Dr. Evil or whatever. I think that's from Austin Powers, but whatever.
Yeah.
The point is that there's a good guy and a bad guy. And it's easy to want to say like, okay, there's this good guy and this bad guy. But it's never that simple. And very often, a lot of the good guys' motivations are not great. And a lot of the bad guys' motivations are justified. But you have to take a deep dive and actually look at it to see that. And a lot of people, I don't think, are willing to do that.
yeah.
So let's talk for a second a little bit more about the 2-month pause in fighting that Israel has put forth, because this just happened. And I think it's important to take note of it,
Yeah.
especially after the World Economic Forum, after Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, after he said all of these things, and after Davos happened, because I don't know if you've seen this or not, David, but even here in Texas where we are, there are billboards. There are billboards that say, save Gaza or save the children in Gaza.
I didn't see
so
it.
they're on billboards on the side of the road here, which
Wow.
was surprising when I saw it. But globally, there's some real heat coming down on Israel for this.
And on us as well.
And on us as
Because
well.
we're
Absolutely.
part of it. We're part of it.
And I think it's the difference between people here in the United States not really understanding that the rest of the world is really not okay with this.
Yeah.
And so the US, you're right, is ending up a bad guy, despite the fact that Anthony Blinken is like, what is to be done? I don't know. I can't find the solution to that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this for a second. What do you really think of this 2-month pause offer in fighting that Israel is putting forth?
Let me first share a screen with you guys. And
Okay.
and I'm not going to comment too much because the picture, you'll be enough to read it yourself. I'll comment differently, but hold on. Let me present this. Share screen. Okay. Where is it?
All right, there it is. Whoa.
Now, this is an IDF guy, military, an IDF. Just look at that.
Yikes. That's on X, formerly Twitter.
That's to me, when you see a behavior like that, this is not a professional soldier. To me, he's deranged. That's why, to tie it back to your point, as far, that's the reason why I wanted to show this, because it's tied to the reason why Israel wants the 2 months is because they don't know where things are headed. They have no idea. And there is resentments inside. You have now soldiers not willing to. I was aware of one that didn't want to fly, refused to fly. And the cabinet inside the Israeli government is you got one camp here and one camp here. That's how they are fighting. And this is where that idea of the 2 months, that's the reason for it, because those 2 months would allow them at least to figure out what can they do, which there is nothing they can do. It's because they are more concerned about what's going on in the north. Why? Because the settlers in the north fled. You are over 243,000, the last account that I read. 243,000. And again, the numbers can change. That's just the ballpark of it. The moment the group HZ fired the first rocket, people left. So they are now deserted. The settlements are deserted. So there is the concern of Israel is not in Gaza, which it is to a degree. The big concern is up the north. And this is why they told the US, we're going to go in, which means the US will have to go in. To me, it's a trick. Why is it a trick? Go back in history and look what happened to USS Liberty, if you know the history of that. So that is where. So the 2 months is basically to just figure out what to do. Both groups, the HA and HZ, they don't care whether they're going to move on with what they do.
Yeah.
Now, the other group, the HI, near the Red Sea, that's a different conversation altogether.
Absolutely.
And this is why Israel now is very, very concerned, realizing that is almost cornered. And the rest of the world is saying enough.
Yeah.
Except one country, ours.
Yeah.
Here. And you get the 2 European countries, Austria and the Czech.
Well, and I think it's interesting because remember, that last week there was a whole thing about how, Biden got really upset and slammed Netanyahu. So there is, because Netanyahu is basically like, US, this is you guys are involved in this too. This is your war too. War. And he got really upset because obviously that's wildly unpopular. That would be extremely unpopular here.
Especially coming the elections.
Right. Yeah. With the upcoming elections. So right now, and if you guys don't know much about the US elections, the Democrats right now don't have anybody but Biden to put in office again. But quite frankly, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, Biden has been
disaster. Let's just say it the way it is.
He's been an absolute disaster. And it was interesting because there were such high hopes from the Democrats with Biden coming in that he was going to fix everything that Trump broke. He didn't. He made
both
it
of
worse.
them. Both of them are the same, two faces of the same coin. This is the reason why most Americans do not understand. The system is set up that way for a reason. Has been for 150 years. That's why there will never be some third party. I just found out this morning that there are some Democrats now wants to vote for Nikki Haley. You believe that?
Ooh,
A warmonger?
Oh, no.
She's clueless. And the first thing she wants a war with China.
Okay.
I mean, just think about it.
I saw the craziest clip of Nikki Haley talking about retirement age. Okay. I'm going to see if I can find this for Rumble, guys. But she was talking about the retirement age. Well, what did she say? It was something like we have to have retirement age reflect the life expectancy now. So 65 isn't old enough. You have to be older than that. That's what she was talking about for Social Security. That we're gonna pay out Social Security when the millennials reach that age, we're gonna pay it out. But 65 is just too young. It's too young.
She's clueless. She's clueless. That's a reflection of our system. That's a reflection for how degrading.
Oh my God.
Degrading our political discourse has become. And let alone in every speech, I listened to some of her stuff. I mean, I won't follow her because that would be a waste of my time. But in every speech, China always comes out. We need to fight China. We can't allow China this. We can't allow that. You can just tell she's been pushed.
Oh, absolutely.
She's been financed for that narrative. This is why I always say the next conflict on the horizon is in Asia.
Well, you know what, David? One thing that we can say is it is very clear what she thinks, what she believes, and what she's going to do. So there is that. So raising the Social Security age and making sure we have war with China.
She's clueless.
But she's also not going to win, and Trump is not going to have her on the ticket with him.
Oh, no. That would be a mistake of him to do that.
We're entering into a very, very odd
because there is
presidential election cycle right now.
The danger that lies ahead is now. Did you know they just changed his appearance on the court?
Oh,
They changed it to the same day
Mhm.
where the New Hampshire primary is.
It's because
I mean, the way they doing it with him, it's
Yeah.
not right.
No,
Whether
it's
you
not
like,
right. It's
whether
not
you
right.
for or against Trump is beside the point.
Right.
You have to be with what's right.
Right.
If we say fairness, be fair to the guy. Doesn't matter you like him or not. You
Yeah.
know, I don't care for Trump. His
Yeah.
foreign policy, it's clueless.
Yeah.
Now he has some other things that, like for example, when he called in on us to stop our support for NATO
Yeah.
budget,
Yeah.
I can see the point on that. But overall, foreign
Mhm.
policy, it's not his forte.
Yeah.
Trump is a showman.
Yes. Absolutely. He's
Politics is not a.
absolutely.
But you gotta be fair.
Yeah.
You don't drag him through this and that
Yeah.
specifically to. Where
I
my big
agree with that.
concern, if he wins
Mhm.
and the Dems will rig the election somehow, that's not gonna be pretty for our country.
Yeah.
I already processed this in my head.
Mhm.
This way I don't get surprised.
Yeah.
But I could also see the danger.
Oh,
of
absolutely.
that. So
Absolutely.
we'll talk more on Rumble on this
Yeah,
one here
yeah.
because there's some certain things that
And we're going live on Rumble immediately after this to talk about the things that we're
Yeah.
holding back sort of right
Yeah.
now.
let's take a question. Let me take a look first here.
Yeah,
See
let-
what everybody. First of all, I'm gonna go all the way to the top. I like to see where everybody joining us
Mhm.
from, and I always like to. There are some names I know here by now.
Yes.
I always see that, and let me
then-
see. Just type in, please, where you're joining us from. I would greatly appreciate it. New York City. This is Timeline. Dunkley, good to see you. I used to go to New York a lot, but New
Mhm.
York changed for me. Francis Tango, as always, from Holland, the Netherlands. That's the good to see you, Francis, as always. Yeah, if you will be guys kind, just type in where you are joining us from here. And then we'll take two questions. Then we'll
Okay.
go right away to Rumble because I have
Yes,
something I need
okay,
to do.
so
Alexandros from Greece. Good
What
to
kind
see
of
you.
questions would you like to take?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
We've got a couple of will Michelle Obama pop up last minute. So
there is a trick to that. As a matter
Mhm.
of fact, there was some conversation about her running.
yeah,
But if you know how she is received inside the US circles, you're gonna shake your head.
yeah.
Given what just happened with the news about Obama. You're aware of it, right? I'll disclose it. I'll disclose it in a Rumble.
That's
I
a
can
Rumble
disclose it
conversation.
here.
But
No,
yeah,
no, you're right. There's possibility,
Mhm.
but it ain't gonna work.
I think at this point it's a little bit too late
Too
in
late.
the game anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't see that, and the Democrats really just don't have anybody else, and they're not pushing Michelle Obama hard enough. I think that
Yeah.
they're taking that seriously.
Why? It's because they know they are not well received.
And I think
Yeah.
it's kind of that almost felt like a Hail Mary to me. They were like,
Yeah.
well, we don't have anybody, but somebody who's got a name that people recognize is Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
So maybe her. So it felt like a Hail Mary to
Yeah.
me, not
And-
a serious thing.
And this is where the problem is when you start just counting on the names
Yeah.
instead of the quality
Mhm.
qualifications of the individual. Just because you have a name doesn't qualify you for the position.
But people don't. Okay, so
They
you
don't
want
get
a
it.
human, you want a human behavior
Yeah.
thing. Okay, people trust people that they think they know. And it's one
Oh.
of the big reasons that celebrities are used to talk about politics, to promote things, because people think that, because evolutionarily we didn't evolve to have screens and people on screens, right?
Yeah.
We evolved to be one-on-one, and the more time you spend talking to someone, looking at someone, being in the same presence as someone, the
Yeah.
more you know them, you feel like you can trust them, you know who they are. So you watch all of these things. Celebrities now all, they give interviews, they have Instagrams and TikToks, and they are personable, right? So
Yeah.
people trust people they know and understand. And it's why celebrities are used in that way.
Yeah.
And it's the same with presidential candidates. Are there candidates that are more that would probably be better suited for the job of president? Absolutely.
Oh, there
yes.
are smart people out
They
there.
don't have the name recognition. So they would
Mhm.
have to build that up.
Yeah.
And they don't have it right now, and they don't have the time right now. What I think is very short-sighted, though, is the Democrats should have started that process
Way back.
way back,
Mhm.
and they didn't.
I'll share a personal story with you guys. I know someone approached me to run for Congress.
Mhm.
Yeah. And when I said, well, yeah, that might be a good idea. But let me ask you a question. And it was a friend of mine. He passed away. It was a high ranking
Mhm.
in the Pentagon
Mhm.
way back. Then I said, how it's going to happen with the funding? And he said to me, you don't worry about that. I said,
Mhm.
that's where my concern.
Yeah.
Don't worry means that whomever is going to fund the campaigns and the elections and all that stuff, I become beholden to.
Absolutely.
And I said, I am not willing to do that.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, you don't worry about it. I said, no. I'd rather make a decision now before it's too late.
Yeah.
So, and I said, second thing, I am not a good fit for that club.
You would tell the truth.
They won't like
You
it.
would tell the truth that
They
they
won't
wouldn't
like
like it.
Yeah, they're like,
Straight up.
oh, Dr. O,
Mhm.
you're going to need to tone it down.
Uh-huh.
And I say,
And you'd say no.
and I say, F you.
Yeah.
Because it's the people that puts me here. That's the responsibility.
Right. But you know what? I think there's a fatal flaw in our system in that
Yeah.
way. Okay. Because the people aren't who are paying the politicians. We're not.
Yeah.
Okay. Politicians make $100,000 a year, basically, right? It's more or less, but it's basically
Which one?
that.
Which one?
Even
members of Congress?
members of Congress, right?
For the House of Representatives,
Yeah.
the salaries are 150.
Right.
For the senators, it's 175.
Okay.
To my
So-
knowledge, that's the last one when I was
to
in.
the average person, that's a decent chunk of change.
Yeah.
But those people they're not being paid basically by the taxpayer, by the person they're meant to represent.
Yeah.
They're making millions
On the side.
and millions on the side. So you have the taxpayer that's paying them
Yeah.
$150,000, $170,000 a year,
Yeah.
which quite frankly, guys, that used to be a lot of money here in the United States, but it
Not
is not
anymore.
anymore. The average home price is $400,000 ish. The average beginner home price is $400,000. So that's not a whole lot of money, right?
That's not a good sign
it's-
either.
No, that's a horrible
Not
sign.
a good sign.
But so
Yeah.
that's not a lot of money compared to the millions they're getting from whoever it is that's
Donors.
gotten paid for
Yeah.
that particular
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And so the US people are not paying. And who are you beholden to? The hand that feeds you.
Feeds you,
So
yeah.
it feels like sort of a fundamental problem with how this is done.
The system is flawed. So, anyway, let's take one more question. And before
Okay.
that, guys, make sure to join us on Locals on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. I
Yes.
think we're going to do it remotely, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I don't know.
Yeah,
There's
so-
a new system at Locals. I don't know whether we
Yeah,
can or not, but
so
we might. I don't
I
know.
do have an appointment
Let's
on that day.
okay.
So don't move the screen, please, because I have the question
Okay.
right in front of me. Question from Astrid De Seco. Question: any chance that Russia might get sucked into the conflict with their recent having show of force in Syria to try to deter Israel? No, it won't. The answer is no. It won't get sucked in, but Russia will make it clear that if its interests are harmed, especially in Syria. Why Syria? It's because Russia has a naval presence in Tartus. Tartus have an access to the Mediterranean Sea. It's all about the water. This is why the whole issue with Crimea, because access to Black Sea. Same thing with Russia has already moved the S-400 missile systems around that base. So it's protecting that. As a matter of fact, they warned Israelis that if they cross the line regarding Russia's interest or assets there, they will shoot down whatever. But I don't see them sucked into this, because this one is, especially when it comes down to the Red Sea or inside the Gaza, that's a different, and it's an old conflict. So Russia is going to be thinking strategically. In addition to, Russia is not in a position right now to get involved in any other conflicts. All right, guys, we'll see you guys on Rumble shortly after this.
I put a link in the chat box, guys. We are headed straight
Yeah.
over to Rumble.
All right. As always, guys, prepare yourself for changing world order. See you soon. Bye-bye.